And my question for you is regarding the traumas and the dramas that we all go through that are a part of our past. And there is two takes on it. You know, like a lot of practitioners, they prefer the way of getting to the root of the problem and going over it, and quite often it involves, you know, many sessions going over it, and Esther takes on it as that you can basically decide to have it done and over with. And some people think that when you decide that you are just burying the traumas deeper, and that you're not allowing them to come to the surface and deal with them, and have them done and over with this way. So what is your take on how we should be dealing with the dramas and traumas of the past?
Okay, the question for those of you that didn't hear that is that there's two different ideas about the way of getting over fear and fear-based trauma, and one of them is to work on it and work on it and work on it and slowly whittle it down to where you can get rid of it, and the other one is to just get rid of it. And both of those can work, and both have downsides. The downside to the just get rid of it is that you try to get rid of it from the intellect. It's an intellectual process of getting rid of it, which won't get rid of it at all. So you can convince yourself, all right, I don't, you know, it's like, instead of I don't want to, or I want to be kind, as opposed to I want to act kind. That's the difference between the intellect and the being level. So at the intellectual level, you say, intellect, from now on, I'm going to act kind, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to just be really nice to everyone. At the intellect, that might alter your behavior for a short period of time, but eventually the true you always comes out. So you're not really accomplishing anything if it's just you trying to trick yourself into thinking that you have grown up when you haven't. So that's the downside to that one. On the other hand, the upside to just letting it go, if you do find that fear, often, because the fear is always smoke, it's almost never really something that was scary. It's only something that you believed was scary. And it is your belief that's the problem. You believe that, you know, your mother didn't like you as well as she did your sister, you know, and because of something that was said when you were 3 years old, you internalized that, but really you got it all wrong. That's not what was in your mom's mind at all, and it wasn't that she liked your sister better than you. You just believed that, and from then on, you've had this problem with being insecure and inadequate. You see, often when you find the source and you get to the fear itself, it just disappears, and then you can just walk away from it. It's gone. You'll look at it and say, oh, I see. Mom was just trying to support and cuddle my little sister because little sister had this other issue going on and this other problem. And that's why Mom had to attend to her for that, you know, maybe month period, because she was ill or she was something else. And then you see the bigger picture. It wasn't about you at all. It was about something else. And then you can just drop it and poof, it's gone. That fear is just no longer there. It doesn't take but an hour to do the whole thing. But if you get stuck in the intellect and you just think you've done it, or you sweep it under the rug, or just whitewash it and make it seem to go away, that's a danger. But you'll know whether you've actually done it or not, because if it goes away, it's gone, and you will be a different person, and all your choices will be different, and you'll see the world differently, your reality will change. That's what happens when you really get rid of a fear. Your reality isn't the same anymore. Weight comes off of your shoulders, you're no longer carrying it anymore. Everything is new. Whereas if it's just your intellect, everything's the same. Nothing changes. So the one where you work at it and struggle with it, that can be a problem because that struggle can become endless to where there is no place where you get rid of the fear. And the struggle becomes part of your life. And you accept that struggle as part of your life, and now your life, you know, you're making an accommodation, I guess, with the fear. That you're going to struggle with the fear if the fear doesn't bite too often. And you don't get rid of it, you make an accommodation with it, and your life is a constant struggle. So that's the downside in doing it slowly. But you never get there. You get to a point where it's good enough, you kind of adjust to it, make peace with it to a certain degree. You know, it's like in a relationship. You can have a relationship that is fantastic. It's real, you know, unconditional love, and it's wonderful. And you can have a relationship where you're pretty good friends most of the time, and that's good enough. You know, you settle for, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a friend, and a good thing that you're nice to each other. It's a good thing you don't squabble or fight much, but that's just about all it is. It's just somebody to share your life with that you don't fight with. And that's good enough, you see. So you can get into accommodation of things that doesn't ever actually get to the root of them. But either one could work. You can get rid of your fear quickly, or you can get rid of it in a long struggle. But each one has its own trap. So it's not that one method is good and the other method is bad. Both methods can be good and both methods can be bad. It just depends on what you do with them, how you approach it, how serious you are. You really want to get rid of it? You really have the courage and you want to be different? Or do you just want to make it stop, you know, getting in your way enough that you can live with it? Those are two different sets of choices. Okay.
So I have a question about two of the sort of popular gurus now and the way they achieved what we call enlightenment. They're Byron Katie and Eckhart Tolle, and both of them, according to what they've reported, they were incredibly depressed and unhappy, and both of them were on the brink of taking their lives. And in a kind of an instant, they were both transformed from completely miserable to enlightened, and then they went on to share their experience with other people. Sort of what's the mechanics of that, and why is it so uncommon? I mean, it would be so nice if we could all wake up tomorrow enlightened, but it doesn't happen to most of us.
No, and I don't really think it happened like that to them either. It wasn't quite that fast. What you're describing is what some people call the dark night of the soul, and then the resurrection from that, or the growing out of that. That is that things get bad, and then they get worse, and they get worse, and they get so bad that they can't get any worse. And you don't see any change possibly going to take place. They're just as bad as they can be. You've de-evolved and degenerated to the bottom floor. You know, now you're in the basement and it can't get any lower. Sometimes when people get in that spot, they do something that they hadn't done before, and that is they just accept life the way it is. And when they do that, they stop blaming everybody else. They stop really blaming themselves, and they just exist. I just am. And as soon as they do that, they start to lighten up, and they start to say, well, if I'm just, you know, this is it and this is me, and it's not that I blame those people and what they did to me and, you know, what I should have gotten but didn't, because most of that misery is self-pity. When they get to that point, they just let it go, because they'd been swilling in it for so long, and it's been just making them miserable, that they just, out of desperation, let go of everything. Sometimes it's even, I'm just going to let everything go and die. And then they find out that they're not dead. But they have let everything go. So this is a thing I've heard, not just, well, I don't know those people too well. I know the second one, not the first, but I've heard probably a dozen people tell me that same story, where they got to this dark night of the soul, where they were totally desperate. And in that desperation, they finally just let it all go, because it was no longer useful trying to fix it, trying to deal with it. And really what they needed to do was just let it go. So that was the first step. And after that, they start building it back up. And it can go up rather quickly, but it's not instantaneous. They don't blink and then they're enlightened. Often they get, the first step is, oh, well, this feels so much better. Now that I just don't care anymore, which is really translated, I'm not blaming everybody anymore. I feel better about it. And one thing leads to the next, and they claw their way up out of the hole they created for themselves. And on the way, they learn a lot of the lessons, because they have had tremendous examples of what not to do. And they have lots of examples of, if you do those things you shouldn't do, where it takes you and where it goes. So they've learned a lot of lessons along the way. They just didn't know, or they had opportunity to learn lessons, but they didn't learn them until finally they hit bottom. So that's what's going on with people like that. But it's not an instantaneous process. They don't wake up and are enlightened. Then over the next, couple of weeks, they go from being totally depressed to not depressed. And then maybe a month after that, they start even figuring things out and start to understand why they were depressed. And then they realized that it was because they were self-centered, and because they were full of self-pity, and because they had all these beliefs. And they start to see, the path that they had just taken. And then they start writing books about how don't do these things and a better way to do it, which they've found out. But it's a common way to get to growth, is just through the bottom. But I don't recommend it. There's a much easier path that you can go. I don't recommend it at all. The other out when you hit that bottom and there's no place else to go, of course, is suicide. So there's a fair number that take that route too, but some bounce back out of that. But they can't bounce back until they actually get to the point that they realize there's nothing they can do to make it better. Nothing. They stop trying to manipulate it. They stop depending on somebody to take care of them. They stop all of it and just accept. Here's the way it is. And then they realize that, well, that's okay, the way it is. And then they start building it back up. But they're gifted with the sense that they understand all the things that brought them there. So now they have a lot of things that they can put the structure back together a lot more quickly than somebody who's not been there and seen where that leads to. So that's what's going on. It isn't that quick. They grow up over weeks and months and even years, that they're still learning and putting things together. Even after their second book, they're still learning and putting things together. It isn't from total nothingness to enlightenment. And there really is no such state as enlightenment. But anyway, who's next?
Hello?
There you are. Okay.
I have a couple of questions. The first one, people talk about, things going wrong in the world and society. Well, you're talking about the larger consciousness system, how it evolved and all that. To me, everything seems perfect. Whether, you have a bad situation happen, you have a relationship that breaks up. I look at everything like, what? Thank God that person left me, because this wouldn't have happened and this wouldn't have happened, blah, blah, blah. I was on my way to a meeting about a month ago, and my phone went off in my pocket, and it was you. It literally said on my phone, it said, I'll be coming to Irvine, blah, 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 October 19th. And I watch all your, I'm like, what the hell? How'd that happen? And my phone literally left, and I had no idea you were coming. And that kind of stuff happens to me all the time. And, you know, I believe everything happens for a reason, and that's probably part of my, you talk about the intent or like the being level. For me, I think every step I take happens for a reason. And I believe that happens for everybody. So when something bad happens, people is, oh, this is my life, blah, blah. It's not your life. You got to look at why that happened. And so the first question is, if consciousness has evolved, how the heck is everything perfect from nature, the water, everything's perfect and there's no flaws the way I see it. And the second question is, you know, life after or death and reincarnation. What's to say you're going to come back as an animal or a human, and why am I human now? And I don't want to come back as a dog or a cat or something like that. It'd be kind of boring, or you know, or whatever. So those are my questions.
Okay. Let's see. Well, the reason that life seems perfect to you is because you have come to the correct idea. You didn't express it exactly right, but it was the same thing, and that is that everything is an opportunity. You know, you say everything is perfect, or everything's just the way it's supposed to be. You know, all these things happen, and you can see, oh, if that hadn't happened, I thought that was a terrible thing, but look, it opened up this other door, and you see that it's not that your life is planned and there's somebody, has a meaningful thing. It's not that there's this determination. It seems like that. It seems like, oh yeah, okay, I had to do that before I could do this. And it looks like it's somebody's kind of manipulating things so that you go down this path. It's not really like that. What it is that everything is an opportunity, to grow. And the more dramatic the change, the deeper the opportunity. So if it's just a little tiny change, then it's just a little tiny opportunity. But if it's a really big change, then it's a really big opportunity to make the right choices. And if you make the right choices, then life will be happy and will be good. And even though something awful happened, something good happened as a result. And that's okay. And your whole attitude toward life is good. And you don't care a whole lot about what happens, because whatever it is, you find the opportunity in it and go up to it. So that's the right attitude, to accept whatever happens, accept it with grace, and try to make the right choices relative to that happening. And if you make the right choices, your life becomes happy and positive and joyful again, because that's what happens to you when you make good choices, even if you've had things that were sad. On the other hand, if something happens to you and you make the wrong choices, you feel self-pity. Oh no, why me? Why did this happen to me? You know, it's not fair. Should have happened to my mother-in-law, not me. You know? If you make the wrong choices, then you will not be happy, you will be miserable, and it doesn't matter what happens to you, you're still going to be miserable. Misery is just your fare because you're making poor choices. So it's not that there's a plan and the right things happen and you're moving up this plan. You just have found the secret, and that is, don't try to manipulate what happens. Accept it, deal with it, learn from it, go on, make good choices. And then no matter what happens later, everything looks like it was just perfect. And then you live a long life and you look back and you said, it wouldn't change a minute of any of it. Even the stuff where I was in tears, I wouldn't change any of it, because all of it turned out to be the reason I'm here. And being here is a really good place to be. So it's just your approach, it's your attitude that makes everything perfect. There's other people who see everything as imperfect. Everything is wrong. Everything sucks. Everything is bad, you know. People are awful. Everybody's greedy. Everybody's self-centered, you know, and so on. And they see just the opposite way. And where you see a perfect world that you're living in, that everything is great because everything's an opportunity, they see a miserable world where they live, where everything is negative and everything is a struggle. So those are just two opposites. One leads to happiness, the other leads to unhappiness. The one is based on caring about other. You see, it's not about you when you say, well, whatever happens, happens, I'll deal with it. It's about what happens and about the choices you make. Most of the choices you make have to do with interactions about other people. The people who live in miserable lives, generally it's all about them. They're miserable because they are unable to manipulate that world to be the way they want it. They don't want greedy people to run the corporations, but they do. Oh no. So, you know, it's almost like they take that personally. You know, they're out to get me. So they just have to suffer through all the evil people in the world. And they can't manipulate that world to be the way they want. They try, but it doesn't work. And they try harder, it works even less. The harder they try, the less it works. And they're just unhappy people. That's, you know, so you're on the right side of that, you're doing it the right way. But it's not because there's this point to your life and that you're destined to go through these things and learn these lessons. You make the points as you go by making good choices and not worrying too much if it hurts. Bad things happen, you say, well, bad things happen. All right, now what am I going to do? How am I going to turn this bad thing into something positive? What do I do? Just walk away, change it? I mean, you've got lots of choices. You just have to make the right choices. And then if you do, everything will work out fine. And as much as you chase and want that happiness, the less that you'll be able to find it. Happiness isn't something you go grab. Happiness is a byproduct of making good choices. So if you're in pursuit of joy and in pursuit of happiness, so what do I have to do to be happy? Well, I need to get that job and I need to have that relationship. And if those are the things that make me happy, I'll start working on that job and that relationship. And you'll find you'll never be happy with that. It'll never work out for you. It'll always look good but turn sour. Because you're trying to manipulate things to be the way you think you want them, but you're not nearly as smart as you think you are. So when you manipulate things to be the way you want them, there's all these unintended consequences that you didn't think would happen that do. So that was what the first part of your question. What was the second part? I've lost it now.
The second was, what's determined whether I come back as
what determines that is what you need. In other words, you get to that point where you are ready to incarnate, you want to get back in the game because it's so much fun, right? You want to get back in the game. And you do a little review of your own growth. And if you see that some parts of you are more grown than others, then you look for something that will stimulate the growth in the area that you need it. So you kind of understand what that is and focus on it some, and the system will find a place for you that suits what your growth needs are. And that's what happens. So if, you know, let's say for somebody, let's say who did a lot of really terrible things, you know, they got way into ego and fear and so on, and they, I don't know, you know, did something awful. Or maybe did a whole lot of things that were awful. Maybe the next time they would need to be put in a place that had a little less opportunity to do bad things. You know, they were given a more protected situation. And if even that turned out really bad, well, maybe they would have to be in something that was even had a little fewer choices. So you can maybe go backwards to something that had fewer and fewer choices in it, because there's less and less opportunity to mess up, and what this person needs is some successes, because those successes then will lead to more successes. But you have to have some success. Like for the 10-year-olds playing basketball, you take the basket and you move it down to where it's only 6 feet off the ground, because they can't throw the ball far enough to get it make a basket in a regular basket. So you lower the hoop, make it easier. So a person who's failing is going to get things that are easier and easier, and if they actually failed that much, they might want to then be a dog or a monkey or something, because human was a little too difficult for them. Too many choices. The more choices you have, the more opportunity you have to grow, and the more opportunity you have to evolve. There's just more opportunity. And if you're doing really well, then you take on something that's a little more challenging. All right, try this one on, see how you do with this. So it's a best guess. The planning that's done is typically not all that detailed, because it's free will, and exactly what you're going to do and who you're going to meet changes all the time. It's hard to, it's hard to make plans that work after much time goes by. Things tend to wander off in their own way. But there are times when people can plan and come back and interact with certain people, and that'll be set up, and the system has to support that to nudge things so that that actually works, because there's no predestination. You can't force it to work, but you can manipulate it to work if it's significant enough that the system's going to bother to do that. But it doesn't happen as much as people think. So what you come back as is really what you need, what's going to be most productive for you. And that means it gets harder and harder as you get more and more capable. You get more and more responsibility, more and more opportunities to excel, and comes with that is opportunities to fail. Excel in a bigger way and fail in a bigger way. But you generally only get to that point once you've succeeded and failed in some smaller ways. You work your way up to more difficult choices. But nobody really knows, the system doesn't know really what's going to happen once you start, because you're going to make choices. It's going to take you have free will, and it's hard to say where you're going to steer that boat. So it's really hard to plan too much. But we all have good days and bad days. We all have good lifetimes and bad lifetimes where things just didn't go right and we made poor choices, and other ones where they went really, really well and we made great choices. So it's not all just a uniform, that path isn't a straight line, going up like this. It's a little zigzagged. Kind of depends. Sometimes a poor choice that was just a small poor choice leads to a bigger poor choice. It leads to a bigger poor choice, and you just slide down that slippery slope into something that's really hard to dig yourself out of. Okay, the next one. Yes.
So I've also heard you say that we can be quite predictable too, right? Like we have free will, but we're predictable.
We are.
We are, and so that when I look at my situation, I'm like, of course LCS knew I was going to fall for what it presented you with, and I was going to take the bait. So then that makes me think that it's not determined, but that I have a little bit of a life script that I had to follow in order to learn some lessons.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Vanessa, that you get to keep working on that lesson for as long and for as many times as you need to learn it.
I'm done. I got it now.
So you don't do it right, you make poor choices, your punishment for that is that you get to do it again. And if you don't get that one right, well, you get to do it again. And it all comes in different forms and different shapes and sizes, but it's all the same lesson. And you do it over and over and over again until one day you hit yourself in the head and you say, maybe I should learn something for this and change my attitude and perspective, and what's really wrong here? Why do I keep making these poor choices? What leads me to make a poor choice? Why do I do that consistently? And there's a reason for it. It's not just bad luck. You know, people say that, oh, I'm really unlucky at picking partners, you know. It always looks good in the beginning and then it turns just sour afterwards. But it's not bad luck. It's the way you see the world. It's the way you interpret information.
Right.
It's what you think's important and what's not. And you get, you know, like you get people who have terrible relationships and they're abused. And they'll go right to another relationship where they get abused.
Bingo. Yeah.
And then they go to another one, you know. And it's like they can find the people that are going to abuse them, you know, and just they're drawn to them. Well, that's because there's fear there that resonates with that personality. And you need to find it, get rid of it, and then you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like it was I was driven by my needs. 3 years ago, when I was in an abusive relationship, and I was in LA, and I asked you, what's the deal with my choice in picking men? And you said to me, well, what's your criteria for picking these partners? Is it needs-based, or does it have anything to do with their capacity to love? And so I was coming from a needy place. I was like, I want a man who's going to love me, and who's going to treat me right. I want. It was very needy. Yeah, so I'm learning a lesson. So this ties into, my question is about primordial man, primordial female.
Mm-hmm.
You described how it's our instincts are out of date now, and now we're modifying them or evolving them. So I blame my instincts on my poor Jason. Can you talk to me more about that? So how does this work as we're evolving them? And what can we do to help ourselves evolve past these instincts that are out of date?
Okay. All right, I can talk a little bit about that. And for any of you who want to hear a little more structured thing than what I'm going to say, at my website, www.mybigtoe.com, I can't tell you exactly how to get there, but there's a bunch of buttons at the top that'll drop down menus, and if you play with all of that, eventually you'll get one that'll drop down menus that has a lot of different kinds of downloads and things you can look at, and maybe it's called downloads. But it's stuff that you can download. It'd be a good name for it if it's not. And you'll find Primal Man, Primal Woman at the bottom of that. It's probably at the bottom because it's old. And there's about 20 pages worth of just a partial skeleton outline of some of the concepts I'm going to talk about. So that would be a good place to actually get that, and you can read it. But what are the instincts and where do they come from? Well, again, these things are instincts that had to do with our survival and our procreation. And it's really the reason that humanity is here in force, is because we had these instincts. You know, there were a bunch of not only primates, but humanoids there. You know, we hear of Neanderthal, that's just one, but there was 4 or 5 or 6 of those other kinds of not Homo sapiens, but still humanoid things that were evolving. They're all gone. Homo sapiens took over the field. All the rest of them disappeared. And for quite some time, Homo sapiens were just making it, just kind of on the brink of having enough numbers to keep birthing enough to survive long enough to keep birthing enough to survive long enough, and so on. It was nip and tuck whether we were going to go extinct like the others did. So what we did to win that race of the hominids is that we discovered specialization. And for the most part, if you look at other, if you look at the monkeys, apes, and so on, for the most part, everybody does everything. You know, they all have to find their own food. They all have to do this and that. Yeah, they do some sharing and they groom each other and they do some things like that. But basically, the basic necessities of life, everybody has to figure out on their own how to get them. You know, and when everybody does everything, that's very egalitarian because everybody's the same in the same boat, having to do all the same things, but it's not very efficient. That's what Henry Ford found out when he made the assembly line, is that everybody doing everything just isn't very efficient. You get a lot more efficient if you specialize. And you can specialize in a way that does this very well, and somebody else can specialize that does that very well, and together you're much better than everybody doing everything. You know? So that's what Homo sapiens did. They specialized. They evolved such that the female's main job was to get pregnant, have babies, and nurse those babies and take care of those babies until they were old enough to take care of themselves, so that they could get pregnant and have babies and nurse them until they could take care of themselves. That was the key thing, because babies is what gave enough humans that we would not become extinct. That was necessary. Okay? But in order for them to optimize that, one, they became smaller, because that way they consume less resources. A lot of species of monkeys, the male and the female are the same, you know, with dogs and cats. The male and the female, little difference, but not big differences. You know, you have to, you know, you can't just look at most animals and decide whether they're male and female, unless you look at their genitals or something else that tells you that. You just look at it, and that could be a male dog or a female dog, and you know, nobody knows, because the sizes all kind of run over each other. A big female is bigger than a small male, and you know, you just can't tell. But with humans, that was a decided difference. And the male's job was to protect and provide for that female so that she could take care of the children and make sure that they survived. So she didn't have to worry about the safety and security. She had that covered with somebody else. She didn't have to worry about finding the food. She had that covered by somebody else. She could put all of her time on making sure those babies grew up and survived to be able to have more babies. That was a more efficient system. The males and females specialized. Men were bigger because they needed to be bigger to do their role as the protector and the provider. That required more size, more strength. So they got bigger, the ladies got smaller because they didn't need all that strength to do what they were doing. They could do it better. Smaller was fine. And a lot of the other characteristics that are feminine come out of that same model. Because ladies were dependent on getting provisioned and being protected, then a dependency tends to foster insecurity. You never really know what's going to happen. You know, is food going to come back, or is actually the guy who's providing that food going to come back? You see? You don't know. Now, so women were seen as very valuable. They were the source of new humans. And that was valuable for two reasons. One, of course, just the species reason. But secondly, humans, in order to survive, had to band together into groups. You know, you might call it tribes or social units or whatever. And everything was very violent and rough in those days. So if this social unit saw another social unit that had some stuff they'd like to have, well, then it's a matter, could they take it away from them or not? Okay? Could they just go in and take that stuff and chase the others off, and now it would be their stuff? That was not seen as something immoral. That was seen as survival. That's how you survive. You get stuff that you need, and if you have to run over other people to get it, well, that's their problem, not your problem. That is very low quality of consciousness, but that's what took to survive, you see. So women were very valuable because they made babies. So if you ran over another tribe, what you would do is that you would kill the men and the boys that were near puberty or past, and take the women into your own, because they would have more babies. Because the bigger your tribe was, the more invulnerable it was, and the more it could run over and get everybody else's stuff. So numbers were everything. If you had 1,000 people in your group, wow, you could run over almost everybody, and nobody could run over you. All of yours was kind of protected. Everybody else, you were the threat that everybody else was afraid of. If you only had 10 people in your group, well, you were fair game for anybody who had more than that. So numbers were important. You needed females, and you need to keep them pregnant, and you need to keep them pumping out babies, and that's what they did. So females were always valued highly. They were taken care of, they were protected. They didn't go out and walk around alone, because if that happened, somebody would just scoop them up and take them over to theirs, and now you were part of that group because they were valuable. Probably the most valuable asset that was around was a female, because she made babies. Men were dispensable. Not indispensable, they were dispensable. Completely dispensable. They had to defend and they had to find the food. Both jobs were fairly risky, and they didn't live very long. They were dispensable. But if they had a woman they were defending and taking care of and they got killed, well, that woman was just brought in under somebody else. Somebody else took care of that woman. It's not like, oh, sorry for her. Her provider went away and now she has to be out alone. No, women are valuable. They didn't let them be alone. They just got pulled in and somebody else would take care of them. You know, in some cultures it was a brother, you know, that took care of them, and in others it was just the whole, whatever. Didn't matter, but somebody would take care of them because they were very So the way men have evolved in their masculine ways is as a dispensable unit that is more, let's say, that is very cooperative with other males, because you have to cooperate to succeed at war or at hunt or anything else. So it has to be cooperative. It doesn't mean you like each other, it just means you can cooperate. There's very little of what's called own group preference among males. There's a very strong own group preference among females. Females like to have female friends, like to connect with other females. There's a group bond there in being female because they needed that to take care of children. Because if you got sick, somebody else had to take care of your kids. They had to have a cooperative effort there, and they had social networks going to take and help each other do the things that needed to get done. Because you can imagine a female that's being pregnant every time that she can get pregnant, she ends up with lots of children. And they may not all survive, but she may have 4 or 5 or 6 children that she's taking care of all the time. That makes her a busy lady. And if she gets ill or something, or even killed, she has to have somebody else that's going to pick all that up and carry it along. So she needs to make friends and have companions that'll help her do that, and that she will do for them. So women have this bond. Men are single, they're individual. They cooperate well, but they do it all in their own way. They don't have own group preference because their friends and their cohorts and whatever, they don't live all that long. People are here today and gone tomorrow. They don't have that kind of in-depth bonding that the ladies have. So that's another thing. So you have dispensable men that are just there to do the duty, to take care of the women. So women have always been taken care of, but being taken care of meant you're stuck in the cave, right? Because unless somebody goes with you, you're easy, because you're small, to be taken away. So you have to be protected, which means you can't wander around alone. So now it sounds like you're in jail, but you're not really in jail. You're being protected from an environment that is very violent, you see. So that's how we grow up. So men have these roles, women have these roles. And it was the violence and the need for population that drove all of that. And the other thing that the Homo sapien females did is that they didn't have just, they didn't have heat cycles, that they were only interested in conceiving, twice a year or once a year, which is other animals did, because that helped keep them healthy. They didn't want them breeding, particularly when their gestation was short. You don't want like breeding every 3 months, having another brood. They'd end up killing themselves before they produced as many offspring as they could have otherwise. But with human females, they didn't have that. They were interested in getting pregnant all year long. See? So we outbred everybody else. It's not that we outfought the Neanderthals and all those other humans. We just ran over them. We bred like bunnies. We just bred, and we survived better than anybody else. And we just absorbed them. That's why everyone has a little bit of Neanderthal in their DNA, because we just absorbed all those other guys and made them disappear, because we bred faster and were more effective in surviving and procreating than anybody else. So that was our strength, not that we were smarter and not that we were stronger. We just bred better. It's what we're good at. So that's some of the differences. So you can see males have certain proclivities, things they feel they need to do, certain ways they are. Females have their ways, and we both, because we have different specializations, we tend to see the world differently. The same words mean different things to us. There's different things that are very meaningful to us that are not meaningful to the other gender. That's why we have the, men are from Mars, but women are from Venus, right? We tend to talk past each other a whole lot because we don't interpret. Remember, you get data, you have to interpret it. We interpret it as if it was said by ourselves or by another man. That's the only way we know how to interpret it. She interprets it as if it was said by her or another woman. That's the only way she knows how to interpret it. So we talk past each other all the time, interpreting things badly. Because males and females are just really two different realities, two different worldviews, two different sets of values, two different ways of thinking and acting. So that's where we were. And right up until the last blink of time, we lived in this violent situation. Men were dispensable, women were valued, women were restricted to where they could be protected. And in this eye blink, everything changed. We don't live in that world anymore. We don't have, roaming bands of people, scooping up women and children and taking them off, to be in their tribe. That's not the way our life is anymore. We don't have to go out and fight the saber-toothed tigers to come home with the food. We don't have to live in caves that are drippy and wet. A lot of that stuff that was risk went away. So we're still stuck with these instincts, though. And if you get crossways with them, they'll make you miserable. But we live in a much kinder, gentler place. What does that mean? Hey, we're all growing up, right? We're evolving. This is a gentler, kinder world than it used to be. That's good for us. It took us a long time to get here. But now we have to realize that the ladies can get out of the cave and walk around all by themselves without being eaten by tigers or scooped up by, other bands that are going to whisk them off to join their thing. We don't have that issue anymore. So the ladies have done that. They've gotten out of the cave, and they can walk around and have jobs and interact with the world and go shopping and do all kinds of things that wasn't allowed before because it was just too risky. Just too risky. So that changes. The guys who were the providers and the protectors, well, that's kind of disappeared too. Now that the females are out of the cave, they can provide for themselves pretty well, it turns out. And they don't need all that much protection. So what are the guys supposed to be doing? What's their role now? Yeah, they can provide a little, they can protect a little, but what really are they all about? Well, that's a problem, isn't it? It's a real big problem because their instincts want them to play a role that they are driven to by their instincts. And if they don't play that role, they make themselves miserable and unhappy because that's what they're made to do. See? So the ladies now get out and they're in the workforce. They're doing things. They're able to get around. They don't have to stay in a cave to be protected. So they have all these other choices now they didn't have before. Oh, they can be a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief. You know, they can do all kinds of things, but their instincts say, get pregnant, have babies, take care of the babies until they grow up. Then get pregnant again and have more babies, take care of the babies until they grow up. So you have this sense of that's what you're about. That's why women need to be and feel attractive. What's this thing about attractive? Attractive means that other men want to have sex with you. That's what attractive means. You attract the opposite sex to want you. Okay? But women also want choice to say yes or no to that. But the attractiveness is an important part of their thing because that's what keeps them pregnant all the time. And that's their instincts. But now they want to go hold a job. And having babies and having jobs and having children and having jobs is a problem. You gotta, you know, it's difficult to work all that together. If you be one, if you're one, you let the other go. And then you feel bad. And if you do that one and let the other one go, then you feel bad. So, you see, men and women, now they're in this soup where the instincts are strong, but the environment doesn't really need those instincts anymore. We're not worried about the human race becoming extinct. 7.5 billion of us living on the planet. It's like reproducing enough to stay viable, which is where our instincts came from, because we did that for 150,000 years. And now, you know, that's not an issue. Mankind, even if it shrinks a whole lot, is still pretty secure in its numbers. You know, we're not going to go extinct. So that's kind of the basis of, you know, what are the things, where are the instincts? There's a lot of other, I'm missing lots and lots of details here because I just don't have time to do it all, but two of the things that biologists and sociologists and anthropologists have wondered about when it comes to gender, this explanation that I'm giving you just answers those questions. And that is, why in cultures all over do the females tend to wear long hair, much longer hair than the guys do? And it doesn't matter what culture you're in, that's just the way it is. Well, why is that? Men can grow long hair. And why is it that of all the mammals in the world, only human mammals have large protruding breasts? All the other mammals don't. Those breasts may swell just a little, but basically they're more functional because what's large and protruding tends to make it a little hard to run, and jump, and climb, and do other things. And it's you would think not a survival in that sense very well. So why would the humans develop that trait when none of the other mammals develop that trait? What's special about us? And the answer to those things is that if you are a female and you're very valuable, then you want to make sure that when that other tribe comes that wants to take your good stuff, that they know the females from the males, because they're going to kill the males and they're going to take the females. They don't want to kill any females. And it's kind of a thing that everybody agrees to, all right, you know, and everybody wants the valuable females that'll make their tribe grow faster and bigger. So we have to have some way, even with clothes on and dress, to differentiate quickly the males from the females so that we protect those females. And a female in those times may have 2 or 3 or 4 mates that protected and provided for her, because hers would keep getting killed or, you know, whatever, got eaten by the lunch that he was trying to catch. And, you know, those things happen, so then somebody else would take care of her. Some bunch come in and kill all those men and they take the women, now somebody else takes care of her. So she never knew what was going on, but she knew that as long as it wasn't an accident, somebody would take care of her and provide for her, as long as they knew she was a woman. Men don't like long hair if you're going to fight, because it's a handle that you can get a hold of. If you've got this hair here, somebody can grab you and jerk you by the head, which is just the least thing you want to have happen. So you'll take rocks and bang them together to cut that hair off just because that makes you less survivable. Women will let it grow because that marks you as a woman. And the man wants that woman to survive, even if he doesn't, because she has his babies. She may be pregnant with his baby, or she may have 2 or 3 other young children that are his, and her and all those children get taken to somewhere else where somebody else takes care of them. So his genetics is being moved forward if she survives. His survival isn't necessary. Her survival is. You see? So in order to differentiate females, it was the longer hair and also the larger breasts. That made a woman easy to see, easy to find, easy to take. It made a man easier to kill because you don't want to hurt the women. You don't want to confuse the two. So I guess the hair worked for a while when it figured that, you know, that also could trick you. The guys could wear some long hair or even put on a wig or something, you know, and then get by and sneak up behind them, right? So that didn't work so well, but the breast was just tough for the guys to emulate. So that was a better way of doing it. So that answers why those 2 big questions, you know, why those things work that way. So you see, we have these proclivities in gender, the way we think, and what we need to do. And right now, everybody is about as confused as they can be about what it means to be a male and what it means to be a woman, because we are turning a curve to where those instincts will slowly change. Maybe 4 or 5 generations we could change them if we all understood where they had to go and we all figured that out. Maybe more like a century or 2, perhaps. But as quick as we could do it, I think would be 4 or 5 generations. But we'd have to really be together and understand things to do it that quick. It's more like centuries that this has to happen over. So your instincts aren't going to change in your lifetime. You're going to have to deal with those. And this environment we're in isn't going to change that much in your lifetime either, other than it's going to get kinder and gentler. You know, and we have to deal with those. So that's really what the book is about, and that's some of the characteristics of, you know, why men are the way they are and why women are the way that they are.
So it's not necessarily your fear, because I was feeling like it's my fear of insecurity that drives me to look for a man to be in a significant relationship with, but it's not necessarily my fear, it's my instinct.
Instincts do that, yes.
So
part of that's just your instinct. Now, being insecure is just a feminine trait, because when you are dependent on somebody else and you don't know whether the next meal is going to come home or not, you don't know whether your guy's going to come home or not, you don't know who's going to be taking care of you later if he doesn't, you live in this world of uncertainty. Well, being a little insecure in a world of, you know, uncertainty is just naturally the way you are. And you have to be able to deal with that uncertainty and live with it, internalize it and accept it and live with it. Women are better with that. But they, you know, so insecurity is part of it. Taking care of children. In order to take care of children, you have to be in charge. You have to be bossy. You have to be able to say, no, don't do that, yes, do that, do it this way, do it that way, because that's the way it is when you take care of children. At the same time, you have to go to the guy who provides for you and say, we need curtains. We need new floors. Paint the cave walls mauve, you know. You need to get those things. So that way, upstream, you know, you have to be able to wheedle. You have to be able to manipulate. You have to be able to convince, connive, all those things in order to get what you and your children need to survive. So you're good at working that angle too. You're good at telling the children what to do, and you're good at working upstream to get what you want. Those are both.
That's why women are hardwired to respond to a man that treats her like she's the most important thing in his life?
Well, of course.
Repeat the question. He didn't have
He said, is that why a woman is hardwired to respond favorably to a man who thinks that she is the most important thing in his life? Yes, of course. Because her security, her survival depends on that man's interest in her and taking care of her.
But if women are so valuable, why wouldn't a woman feel super secure and not worry about any of that?
Well, because also,
Repeat the question.
if women were so valuable, why wouldn't they feel so super secure? Because those situations that they were in could be better or could be worse. You know, they could be one of 4 or 5 wives. They could have a guy who takes care of them and feeds them and puts them in a nice cave, but abuses them or slaps them around or otherwise isn't nice to them. So they don't know what they're going to be in for next. It won't necessarily be a nicer place or even as good a place as they were. They just don't know. All they know is that it's likely to change. It could get a lot worse. And in general, with a bunch of low quality consciousness people, it wasn't likely to be such a nice and sweet space to be in anyway.
Were individuated units of consciousness involved in the Neanderthal era?
Repeat the question.
Were IUOCs, individuated units of consciousness, evolved with the Neanderthals?
With like the way this discussion is
Yeah.
anatomy?
Yeah, I suspect that they were at that time also involved, yes, with the Neanderthals. I suspect that once we had avatars here with enough with enough interesting free will choices, that's when IUOCs started to want to play those avatars. And I suspect that that was while there was lots of different, humanoid types walking around. So sure, they would all be, they would all have IUOCs or free will awareness units as consciousness. Because in the beginning, all the players were non-player characters. And it's only as characters became interesting to play did consciousness, IUOCs, and free will awareness units log on to them to play
The
them.
larger consciousness system initially created this reality. Was there any idea about what it would turn into?
Well, I'm sure there was.
Repeat the question.
If the LCS set this up to evolve, did it have any idea what it would turn into? And I would say yes, it definitely had some hopes for what it would turn into, that it would evolve into something that would create avatars that made interesting choices.
So we are probably not the best.
Tom, we have to go to the person who was next in line for question.
Go ahead, finish that one.
So we are just, I'm looking at a room full of avatars that probably have individuated units of consciousness within them, most of them, I'm assuming. And if it's always been like that, it raises a lot of questions about, could it have been anything? Could we have been a completely different type of mammal or a reptile or anything for the consciousness to interact through, to learn, to grow?
Could we have been a reptile or any other kind of critter to have grown that way?
Been something as useful as us to learn?
Yeah, well, what it had to be was some sort of critter, including maybe a human critter, but some sort of critter that made interesting moral choices. To do that or not do that, to help or to hurt, to be nice or not to be nice. So if you had critters that made choices like that, then there were consciousness playing those critters. Dogs and cats are conscious. And horses and bumblebees, lots of things are conscious. And they're doing the same thing we're doing. They have choices to make. They have free will to make those choices, and as they make those choices, they evolve or de-evolve. They're just doing it in a much smaller set of choices. Their decision space, which is their set of choices, is just much smaller. So consciousness comes in all sizes and shapes, depending on its potential and its capacity and its ability. So the kind of consciousness that wants to be with a human is one that has lots and lots of choices. One that's not so as evolved as that might be, in a bumblebee. It only has maybe a few dozen choices. I don't have any idea how many choices a bumblebee has. I don't want to get picketed by the bumblebee union or something, but whatever number of choices it has, you know, it's small compared to humans. And you have dolphins who have bigger brains than we do, more complex cerebral, you know, material than we do.
Nicer than we are.
Yeah, and they're much nicer than we are, but they don't have as many choices. They can't even destroy the world in one way, and we can destroy the world in 5 or 6 different ways, you see. We have lots of choices that we can make. You know, we build things and machines and computers, and all the stuff provides choices and choices. So we have a very vast decision space to work in. And, you know, dolphins may be more evolved than us in some ways, but their choice set isn't as large. I'm sure they have, you know, thousands and thousands of choices of things they can do or not do, but because they don't build and construct and engineer and that sort of stuff, their choices are kind of limited to their natural choices in the environment rather than choices they create that didn't exist in the environment before. But we're good at making lots and lots of choices that are outside and beyond the environment. All of these choices are opportunities for us to make good or bad choices. So back here.
One more before the break.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about local universe, personal individualized universe. So, like that gentleman who was talking earlier, I know that the emotion and the mental plays a great deal in our programming and the way we behave.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware that with the way we look at everything and perceive it, we could have quite a great universe of our own bubble, if you say so. So while I'm working on this myself, so I feel myself I'm in a good place. I'm working on it still to even make it better. So I would like to see if there is any more nuggets. So I would like to ask you if you could perhaps give some tips as to how we could maximize in a way of having our local individual universe in a way that goes toward what we intend to go, and because when we interact with other individual units of consciousness within our local universe, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about global. I'm talking about the individualized and the universal that we are surrounded by. What are your suggestions?
Okay, a couple of things to kind of sort out the terminology. Each one of us lives in our own personal reality, okay? Because our reality is what we interpret the data to mean. We get data, we have to interpret that data in terms of our own experience base, things that we've experienced, things that we know, our beliefs, our fears. We interpret the data through our own filter. And that data, how we interpret that data becomes our reality. That's what we see out there, is our interpretation of the data. So in that way, everyone lives in their own personal reality. But that's not to confuse that with solipsism, which says that there is, you know, everyone is the creator of their total universe. You know, like I'm the only person that really exists and all the rest of you are just players in my game. And then everybody feels that way, that you're the only person that exists and everybody else is just a player in your game. It's not like that at all. This is a multiplayer game, multiplayer virtual reality. We interact with each other. And you can do things, well, all of you do things, and what you do affects other people. There's very little you can do that doesn't affect anybody but yourself. Almost everything you do affects other people, and everything that they do affects you. Even now, you know, on a more global scale, you know, the things that happen, you know, in the Middle East have an effect on us. The things that we do have an effect on them. So even globally, we're all interacting with each other, which means we don't have our own universe. We have to share this universe with everything that's in it, and with all the critters that are here. We share it with all of them. Some of them affect us, and we affect them. You see, so it's a shared reality, but it's also a unique to the individual reality. So we're not talking about solopism, which is, it's not a shared reality. You know, you're just players. You're all NPCs. I'm the only player here, and everybody else is an NPC generated by the computer. That never made any sense to me, but evidently it made sense to enough people to actually get a name called solopism. So that's not really what you're talking about, right? You're talking about being in our own personal conscious awareness.
That said, that's what I indicated as we are dealing with other individual unit of consciousness within our universe. So I'm not familiar with that terminology you just said, but I'm not thinking that we are only one and we are the PC. Absolutely not. So yes, go ahead, please.
So how we interact with other people is the main way that we grow up. That's where our choices come from. That's the choices that really matter. I mean, we have other choices too, like what kind of toothpaste to use. You know, it's a choice. But it doesn't really affect our growing up very much. But how we interact with other people, and the tighter and the closer we are to those other people, the more that interaction grips us. So how we interact with our significant other, that's where the rubber meets the road for most people. That's where you really learn about that ego and those beliefs and how your realities are different, and there's a whole lot of learning comes out of that. So it's in connection with other people. It's our interaction with other people is the very largest place that helps us grow up. So it's necessary to be in a mixed group, and you grow up to kind of, as we say, have your intention, you know, the way you intend, just by having a being level intent. You modify future probability with your intention. So the future could be any number of ways. Some of those ways are more probable than others. That's what I mean by future probability. So it's all the things that could possibly be and the probability that each of them will come to pass. That's a big future probability database. And your intent modifies those probabilities. So if you intend to get rid of your fear, and that's a strong intent, you will get rid of your fear. If you intend that you will be kind, then you will be kind. Now you might start first with the intellect and just try to act kind for a while you're trying to be kind. But to be kind, you have to do more than act kind. You have to really be kind. And that'll only happen if you have a strong internal intent at the being level, not at the intellectual level, but at the being level, to be kind. So you will become what you intend to become. And in that way, we do create ourselves. I mean, our quality of consciousness is all ours based on the choices we make. The more we're aware, then the more informed that intent is, and the better you play the game.
So I guess the follow-up question would be, how do we magnify the intent?
Okay, the intent. How do you magnify the intent? Intentions can be weak or strong. Just to start off with, the separation of intellect from being level, intentions from the intellect are weak. Intentions from the being level are strong. Being level is another word for the intuitive level. Okay. Intellectual level is often what we're aware of intellectually. It's our thinking, it's our analysis level, it's our judging. All of that takes place in the intellect. So if you just, like throwing a penny in a wishing well and make a wish, that's just an intellectual thing. Okay, so what do you need to make your intent powerful? One, it has to come from your being level. Another, it has to come from the core of you. It can't just be a thought or a wish. It has to be something that you really, truly are or want to be. Something from the core. And it will be more powerful if it is focused. That means it's not just some very vague intent, I want to do better. Well, that's nice, but it's not going to create the result as much as if I want to be not just better, but what better, how better. You know, more specific is better. So an intent that is focused will have more power to create what it's focused on. The second thing is it needs to be a low noise intent. People's minds tend to be jumping around all the place all the time. That's what you learn when you first start to meditate. When they say empty your mind of all thoughts, and you're successful for about 3 seconds. And then thoughts come in and you say, oh, I'm not supposed to be thinking, and you put them away and 5 seconds, thoughts come in. And you realize when you start meditating that your mind is just full of thoughts that are just running in and out, like a bunch of wild kids with no supervision. They're just running around in your head all the time. And that's noise. So a low noise, which means you can clear your mind of everything except just what your intention's on. All the other thoughts can go. You can put 100% of your focus on that intention. So clarity, preciseness, low noise, and the last thing that makes a big difference is the intention has to have some intensity behind it. It can't just be, well, it can, but it's not very powerful if it just has a very casual kind of, well, yeah, I'd like to be more kind, but I'm all right. It's not going to change much. It has to be something you really want, and you really seriously want to be more kind. And that's not just in your mind. It's not about acting. It's about being, and it's important to you. That's the intensity. So if you put all those things together, the focus, the clarity, the low noise, and the intensity, things will happen. Your intention will start to manifest what it is you intend. Now, the other variable here is look at the probabilities. So here's something that's going to be 1,000,000 to 1. You want it to happen, but it's 1,000,000 to 1 that it's going to happen. So it's very unlikely. Okay, and you're a wizard or a wizardess, and you can put your intent on this very strongly, very well, you're good intent. You make it from one in a, 1,000? 1 in 1,000, you get all the way down to 1 in 100. Wow, that's a lot of change. You are really a good wizard, but it's still not likely to happen. And that's because it was so much that you had to change it. It's still not so likely to happen. But if you have something that's, 60% to 40%, well, now there's not so much there. Dropping it from bringing that 40% up past 60 and moving the 60 down or something, changing that's not so hard. See, that's a lot easier to do. So it depends on what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is manifest, a pink elephant in a tutu doing ballet, in the town square. That's really, really hard to do because it's only 1 in probably a trillion that's going to happen. But if it's something more within range, then it's easier to do. So if you're just trying to make it sunshine on the day you're going to have a picnic, that's not too hard. There's a lot of uncertainty. If you have uncertainty, then you have the ability to modify the probability. If you don't have much uncertainty, see, when it's 1,000,000 to 1, there's very little uncertainty about what's going to happen. Or 1,000 to 1, very little uncertainty about what's going to happen. So the uncertainty is a little teeny. Then you can't do much. You have a lot of uncertainty, you can do a lot. That's why one of the easiest things to do with your mind that's evidential is healing. It's easy to heal somebody else with your mind because biology has so much uncertainty about what happens that there's always room to work. The probabilities are almost never 1,000,000 to 1. Even if somebody's got stage 4 cancer, you're going to die in 3 months, there's some percentage of those people that wake up one day and they don't have cancer anymore. It just goes away. It happens. So miracles happen all the time in the field of biology and medicine. That leaves room for miracles to happen. You see, uncertainty creates the space for those things to be able to happen. So things are in medicine are almost never 1,000,000 to 1, because out of 1,000,000 people, somebody will, do it differently. Somebody won't do that. So your probabilities are much more balanced. It's more like 5 to 1 or 10 to 1, and those are still fairly big, but much easier to overcome than 1,000 to 1. So those are the variables. It has to do with what are the probabilities to begin with, and with how much power you can put into that intention. Also, the other variable is how often do you visit it? Do you just one time try to heal someone and then you're done? Well, that will do that much. If you go do it again, that'll add that much. You do it again, that'll add that much. You get 10 people to do it, adds 10 of them if they're all equally capable. So it's additive. So that intention needs to be over and over and over again to raise or lower the probability as you wish. So those are all the variables based in how do you get your intent to actually do what you want.